Hello, and thank you for joining the Welcome to the ISO. Before we begin, please ensure you've opened the WebEx participant and chat panels by using the associated icons located at the bottom of your screen. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. Please note that all audio connections are muted at this time. You may ask a question at any time by selecting all panelists from the drop-down menu in the chat panel, enter your question in the message box, and hit Enter to send. With that, I'll turn the conference over to Radha Madrigal, Lead Client Trainer. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Grace. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the California ISO. Today's quarterly webinar is scheduled for 2 hours and is intended to provide an introduction to an audience that comes from a broad spectrum, from energy sector newcomers to public officials and regulators to ISO veterans who may already be familiar with various ISO functions. My name is Radha Madrigal, Lead Client Trainer in the Customer Readiness Department, and I will be facilitating today's discussion. On behalf of the ISO, thank you for joining us today. Let's take a look at the primary topics we will touch on today. These topics are intended to be high level to give you a general understanding of the ISO and its functions, and you will be pointed to where you may find more information that is impactful for you. This webinar is being recorded, so if you would like to hear it again, or if you think it would be helpful to others at your organization, it will be posted on our Learning Center webpage in approximately 3 to 5 business days, along with a copy of these slides. The final slides will also contain some helpful links that relate to the material that we cover today. Along with this recorded webinar and the slides are many other informational resources, including computer-based training courses and other initiative-related recorded webinars. I will show you how to find our Learning Center later in this presentation. There will be breaks during the discussion where the operator will open the phone lines for verbal questions. If you have questions throughout the presentation that you want to have addressed, you can also type your questions in the chat at any time, and the moderator will read it on your behalf during the Q&A sessions. If we can't answer your question right away, we will research the topic and email a response to all of the participants. I do want to mention from a timing perspective that I have allocated ample time for questions. So this webinar is scheduled for 10 till noon for a 2-hour session, but the content that I have to cover is perhaps roughly about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. So we've allocated plenty of time for you to ask your questions, so feel free to do so without worry that we will extend the webinar too long. Approximately 2/3 of the United States and more than half of Canada is broken up into 9 energy regions. Independent system operators, ISOs, or regional transmission operators, RTOs, are the federally regulated regional organizations that perform the same functions of coordinating, controlling, and monitoring the operation of the electrical power system, as well as acting as a marketplace for wholesale power for these regions. Similar to a stock exchange, an ISO never actually owns or takes title to the energy that is purchased and sold, and only acts as the mechanism to bring buyers and sellers of energy and energy services together. The California ISO is one of these entities and resides in the regional area known as the Western Interconnection. Though the ISOs and RTOs have different ways of operating their grids and markets, we all participate together in the ISO RTO Council that is committed to work together to build a smarter and more efficient grid that is prepared to meet North American markets and consumer needs. During this webinar, we will be focusing on the California ISO, or ISO, as I will call it moving forward, and its processes, but it's important to note that if you are doing work with other ISOs, being aware of the differences in how they all operate and the terminology used will be a great benefit in allowing your interaction to be more successful. Like many other ISOs, the California ISO is a nonprofit public benefit corporation. We are responsible for the constant and reliable flow of electricity for the health, safety, and welfare of consumers, but unlike a public utility, we are profit neutral, independent, and we do not serve end-use customers. We operate the transmission system, but not distribution lines. Those are operated and maintained by the utilities, who also perform maintenance on generators and transmission systems. Unlike the utilities, we do not own any transmission or generation assets, and we do not take ownership of the energy on the system. We do, however, coordinate the maintenance of these grid facilities to ensure sufficient resources are available to meet the needs of consumers. It is our resolve to facilitate a fair and transparent wholesale electricity market, and we accomplish that through our policies, planning, and initiatives. We provide state-of-the-art technology that allows for enhanced situational awareness of the state of the bulk electric grid to help grid operators maintain reliability and keep the lights on. We have a comprehensive transmission planning process to accommodate the need for system expansion, as well as clearing the way for clean, green resources to access the grid. We actively engage with state and federal entities to support policy and regional goals for integration of more distributed and clean power products and improved coordination over larger geographical areas to enhance reliability and lower costs. The ISO is located in the Western Interconnection, which is represented here. In addition to being an ISO, we are also registered as a balancing authority, or BA. While all ISOs are BAs, not all BAs are ISOs. A balancing authority area, or BAA, is a combination or set of intertie points and resources, and the balancing authority is responsible for matching generation and load while maintaining the electric frequency of the grid. There are 39 separate BAs in the West, each with the same core functions of preparing the system for next day operations using resources within their boundaries, as well as taking into account imported energy from neighboring BAs and matching changing supply with changing demand in real time. The ISO is the largest BA in this region, handling an estimated 36% of the electric load in the Western Interconnection. Utilities, such as investor-owned utilities or public utilities, sit inside of the boundaries of a BAA, and their energy may be shared throughout the entire interconnection, enhancing reliability through greater resource pools, as well as helping achieve renewable generation targets and managing costs. As this energy is shared between BAAs, continual communication and accurate tracking between the BAs is critical to maintaining situational awareness of grid efficiency. Electronic tagging, or e-tagging, tracks the energy that is scheduled to flow between BAAs. E-tags contain data that allows us to model where energy is being produced and consumed and what transmission lines are being utilized for reliability and settlement purposes. Our transmission planning process begins annually and lasts 15 months. This process has 2 phases for project definition and evaluation, and a possible third for competitive solicitation for selected projects. In Phase 1, we are developing forward-looking assumptions. In Phase 2, we are performing analysis and identifying transmission needs. And then, if approved by the ISO board, in Phase 3, we select proposals to build needed transmission projects. As a grid operator, the ISO makes sure the lights stay on in our balancing authority area. Every balancing authority area uses different means to accomplish this task. The California ISO supports the reliability efforts by running markets for energy and capacity. Additionally, the ISO also handles coordination among BAs in its role as a reliability coordinator, known as RC West. On November 1st, 2019, the ISO became the official reliability coordinator of record for 41 electricity balancing authorities and transmission operators across 14 western states and northern Mexico. RC West now has oversight of power grid reliability for balancing authorities and transmission operators in the Western Interconnection, monitoring compliance for 87% of the load in the western U.S. A reliability coordinator has the highest level of authority and responsibility for the reliable operation of power grids and has wide visibility of bulk electric systems. RC West monitors the interconnected power grids in the West for compliance with federal and regional standards, determines measures to prevent or mitigate system emergencies in day-ahead or real-time operations, and leads system restoration following major incidents. The series of milestones the ISO completed to launch this service are listed at the bottom of this slide for your reference. As an ISO and BA, we must adhere to strict oversight from key agencies, which include FERC, NERC, and WEC. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, is the independent U.S. federal entity that is the regulator of our market and, as such, has jurisdiction over interstate electricity sales, wholesale electric rates, natural gas and oil pipeline rates, reliability standards for the bulk power system, and so forth. FERC reviews the ISO's market rules and transmission rates to ensure they are just and reasonable and do not create undue preferences or discrimination under the Federal Power Act. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, is the international regulatory authority whose mission is to assure the reliability and security of the bulk power system in North America. NERC works with all stakeholders to develop and enforce standards for power system operations, physical and cybersecurity, and system operator preparedness, and then enforces compliance with those standards. They also work with the North American Energy Standards Board, or NASB, to develop standards, including e-tagging standards. The Western Electricity Coordinating Council, or WEC, is a nonprofit corporation responsible for coordinating and promoting bulk electric system reliability in the geographic area known as the Western Interconnection, which we displayed on an earlier slide. Here you see an org chart of how the ISO is structured, which includes the various teams that you would most likely interact with. Using our Board of Governors as the starting point, you can see the relationship between departments, committees, and regional entities. Our board is comprised of 5 members that each serve a staggered 3-year term and are appointed by the Governor of California. Our Department of Market Monitoring reports directly to our board and is responsible for ensuring that the market remains competitive by analyzing market trends and market initiatives, identifying potential anti-competitive market behavior or market inefficiencies, and enforcing FERC decisions. In order to provide transparency, this Department of Market Monitoring produces regular reports that are available on the ISO website. The main task of the Audit Committee is oversight of the ISO's budget and financial operations, while the Market Surveillance Committee provides the board with independent oversight of the market. The EIM governing body is ancillary to the Board of Governors and exercises delegated authority from the Board of Governors over Western energy imbalance market rules. There is also a body of state regulators that includes representation from 8 states responsible for advising the EIM governing body and ISO board on matters of interest. There is also a regional issues forum that is the public vehicle for stakeholders to discuss EIM-related issues, including impacts to neighboring balancing authority areas. Our president and CEO is Steve Berberick. The Transmission Planning and Infrastructure Development Team works on the development of grid infrastructure. Market Policy and Performance works on market design. looks at market performance and integrating renewables into the market, and interacts with California regulatory agencies. The Technology, or IT division, manages the market and system applications, as well as all corporate applications. They also maintain the highest standard of security for cybersecurity, which is critical to ensure the safety of grid and market operating systems, as well as our customers. Our Operations division maintains reliability, runs the market, and manages the process from bid to settlement. The General Counsel division is our legal group that works on the ISO tariff and is the group that interacts with FERC, NERC, WEC, and other agencies when it comes to filings, compliance, and regulations. The External and Customer Affairs team interacts with customers both within the ISO footprint and at the regional level as well. These interactions cover everyday questions as well as forward-looking policies, such as improvements to the ISO market, energy imbalance market, and regional integration. Those of us here on the Customer Readiness team are part of the External and Customer Affairs organization. We also have HR and finance functions that are present, but perhaps you won't be directly interacting with them, so I didn't put them on this slide here. With all of the functions of the ISO, it is imperative that these boards, committees, and departments work effectively together to serve the needs of our customers. Though we are not a state agency, we work with these agencies to implement state policy, perform studies, facilitate a fair and transparent wholesale electricity market, and drive innovation. The Air Resource Board's mission is to promote and protect public health, welfare, and ecological resources through the effective and efficient reduction of air pollutants, while recognizing and considering the effects on the state's economy. One of their main focuses is limiting greenhouse gas emissions through programs that utilize renewable energy credits, or RECs. Generators can purchase these RECs in order to offset their air emissions and continue to operate their facilities. The California Energy Commission, or CEC, is responsible for the certification of electrical generation facilities as eligible renewable energy resources and adopting regulations for the enforcement of renewable portfolio standards, which is the procurement requirements of public-owned utilities. The RPS is currently set at 60% of total energy procurement from eligible renewable energy sources by 2030, and the ISO is active in working to help achieve this goal. We also work with the California Senate and Assembly to effect change in the energy industry. The Water Resources Control Board is focusing on once-through cooling issues. We have a number of generators in California that are close to the coast and use seawater to aid in the conversion process of condensing steam back into water, which can have a detrimental effect on marine habitat. The Water Resources Control Board is coordinating a long-term effort with resources to find alternative ways to cool their plants, or possibly retire them. The ISO works with the Public Utilities Commission on resource adequacy and generation procurement. The CPUC implements and administers RPS compliance rules for California's retail sellers of electricity, which include large and small investor-owned utilities, electric service providers, and community choice aggregators. The CPUC adopted a resource adequacy policy framework in 2004 in order to ensure the reliability of electric service in California. The CPUC established these resource adequacy obligations, or RA obligations, applicable to all load-serving entities within the CPUC's jurisdiction. The CPUC's RA program guides resource procurement and promotes infrastructure investment by requiring that LSCs procure capacity so that capacity is available to the ISO when and where needed. The Integrated Resource Plan is an umbrella planning proceeding to consider all of the Commission's electric procurement policies and programs and ensure California has a safe, reliable, and cost-effective electricity supply. As I mentioned before, though we are not a state agency, we still want to help shape policies as they affect our customers and grid operations. so it is of great benefit for us to work closely with these entities inside California as well as with agencies outside of California. But we don't just work with regulatory agencies, oversight boards, and state agencies. We also partner with our stakeholders, which is critical to the success of the ISO. Stakeholder input is essential to ISO planning processes and for the success of new initiatives, from policy development to implementation. We encourage you to participate in our stakeholder engagement opportunities. On our website, under the Stay Informed tab, you will find information on our stakeholder processes. This page lists all of the initiatives we're working on at the ISO and provides all of the papers and meeting schedules for those initiatives should you be interested in participating in the discussion. We are committed to providing ample chances for stakeholder input into our market design, implementation, and infrastructure planning activities. The stakeholder process will shape the market design and policies through a series of proposals, meetings, and comment periods, including any changes to our tariff. I see a note there in the chat asking if there are contact persons for the General Counsel. I will make a note of that and follow up with you when I send an email out about this webinar, which contains a survey and other things. I will also share with you contact information for the General Counsel Department. A great deal of the documentation, say again? Oh, I heard feedback on the phone that sounded like Grace was talking. Okay. A great deal of the documentation that we adhere to from a reliability and safety standpoint is defined by federal and regulatory standards. Our primary document is our tariff, which outlines the rates, terms, and conditions under which the ISO operates. The tariff is modified in collaboration with our stakeholders through our stakeholder process, which I had briefly touched on that previous slide. Pertinent FERC rules are codified in our tariff, so any wholesale exchange of electricity in our market comes under their purview. To view our tariff and associated filings in a more user-friendly way, you can visit our eTariff viewer that offers convenient access to all ISO-related files that are part of FERC's eTariff system. We also have business practice manuals, or BPMs. The rules in the tariff can be high level at times, and so our BPMs provide detailed rules, procedures, and examples for the administration, operation, planning, and accounting requirements of the California ISO and the market that are consistent with the ISO tariff. Adherence to the manuals is important for orderly operation of the ISO market. To ensure accuracy and clarity of the BPMs, we have a systematic and publicly transparent change management process called our Proposed Revision Requests, or PRRs, which include monthly meetings to discuss submitted change requests. We also have operating procedures, which are used to guide the critical step-by-step actions of our control room tasks. Some of these procedures are posted on our website, while others are confidential. The ISO is registered with NERC as a balancing authority, a transmission operator, a transmission service provider, planning coordinator, market operator, and reliability coordinator. Together, these roles are grouped into three main categories: reliability, infrastructure planning, and market operations. Throughout this presentation, we'll take a look at each of these in a little more depth. As our industry moves into the future, we face challenges and competing priorities. Reliability is the foremost grid consideration, but it is not the only consideration. As more renewables and green power products are added into the power mix, as we expand our horizons, we face challenges related to under or oversupply and the need for more flexibility. When there is more electricity being generated than places to store or export it, or when there is too little supply, it could affect the reliability of the grid. The bottom line is that there are a lot of things we want to do, but there are cost, time, and impact considerations. Therefore, it is critical that we coordinate with several entities to plan the transmission needs of the ISO Balancing Authority area. Transmission planning at the ISO is an open and transparent process that actively engages stakeholder and public input and uses the best engineering analysis possible to determine short and long-term infrastructure needs of the ISO transmission grid, which is comprised of over 26,000 circuit miles to maintain reliability and bring economic benefit to consumers. The ISO works closely with the CPUC and the CEC throughout the transmission planning process to identify and study reliability, policy-driven, and economically driven needs. Looks like I put a duplicate slide in here for our transmission planning process that goes over phase 1, 2, and 3. So we'll just look at that again real briefly. Phase 1, we develop a detailed study plan. Phase 2, we're doing sequential technical studies and publishing our comprehensive plan. And then we take it to the board for approval. If approved, we then select proposals to build needed transmission projects. Just as we have a transmission planning process, we also have a robust generator interconnection process to help resources interconnect to the ISO grid. Our streamlined process helps resource owners understand the steps to interconnecting their resources to the ISO grid by providing requirement compliance information, as well as an assigned interconnection specialist to walk the entity through the entire process from the beginning through commercial operations. We're now going to take a high-level look at this process. At a high level, the generator interconnection process starts when a resource submits a request to interconnect. This kicks off the generator interconnection study to determine reliability impacts to the system and identify any upgrades that need to be made. This study process takes just over 2 years to complete. After the studies and approval to move forward, interconnection agreements are signed, and then the new resource implementation, or NRI, process begins. Once this process is complete, the resource can begin participating in the market. The tariff allows 7 years for a project to reach its commercial operation date after the interconnection request is submitted. An important item to note is how critical it is to pay attention to these deadline dates. It is important to keep all projects moving forward as many processes are linked and feed one another. One of the main tasks of the queue management specialist is to make sure the projects in the queue or process are moving along and interconnection customers are meeting their dates to ensure that generation resources can be interconnected in an efficient manner. An ISO typically has a competitive energy market, which most BAs do not have. As a registered market operator, we act as a marketplace for wholesale power, or basically a clearinghouse, under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The ISO wholesale energy market is comprised of distinct day-ahead and real-time processes. The energy products and services traded in our market allow us to meet reliability needs and serve load. The day-ahead energy market enables parties with bilateral agreements to schedule their contracted supply and demand into the market, offload excess supply in the form of energy or ancillary services, and secure pricing due to changes in load forecasts or for incremental changes in demand. Most demand is met in advance of the market through utility-owned or bilaterally procured resources. The ISO's real-time energy market has the hour-ahead scheduling process, which enables import and export resources to schedule their megawatts hourly, as well as a 15-minute market, or FMM, that allows variable energy resources, such as wind and solar, to submit energy forecasts and decremental bids closer to the financially binding interval, which increases bid accuracy. The 5-minute market is intended to meet the instantaneous demand that shows up in real time. The purpose of the day-ahead market is to assure that there are adequate resources available and deliverable in real time. Energy is the actual electricity needed to meet the demand of the consumers. In general, much of the energy used within California is procured through bilateral contracts outside of the ISO markets, in which supply is purchased under contract to meet demand. This energy needs to be scheduled into the ISO markets so that the ISO can use the information to monitor the physical energy flows on the system. In most cases, energy that is procured outside of the ISO markets is submitted as a self-schedule. The day-ahead market enables suppliers to submit into the markets energy not under contract and enables buyers to procure additional supply in the event they do not have enough under contract to meet their demand. We use demand forecasts, which allow us to know how much energy will be needed in real time to meet load requirements. The ISO must project how much energy will be needed and how much will be available for the next day, the day after that, next week, next month, and next year. And we do that through robust forecasting practices. The more accurate data we have, the more accurate the demand forecast. Therefore, the ISO is consistently working on improving load, wind, and solar forecasts in the day-ahead, hour-ahead, and real-time timeframes to keep the lights on and the costs lower for consumers. Now let's conduct a brief overview of the market timelines. We have just talked about both the day-ahead and real-time markets, and this diagram shows the relationship between the two. As you can see, they are very similar. The day-ahead market opens 8 days before the trade date and closes at 10 a.m. the day before. The day-ahead market is made up of 3 market processes that run sequentially. First, the ISO runs a market power mitigation test. Bids that fail the test are revised to predetermined limits. These market power mitigation measures are intended to provide the means for the ISO to mitigate the market effects of any conduct that would substantially distort competitive outcomes in the ISO markets while avoiding unnecessary interference with competitive price signals. The second process is the integrated forward market, which establishes the generation needed to meet bid and demand. Market prices set are based on bids. And last, the residual unit commitment process secures capacity from additional resources in order to meet the forecasted demand for the next day. These processes are co-optimized to produce a day-ahead schedule at least cost while meeting local reliability needs. The final step of the day-ahead market is to publish the market results at approximately 1300. When the day-ahead market is published, this triggers the opening of the real-time market. Bids are once again submitted along with base schedules from our EIM participants. Market processes run, bids clear the market, and dispatch orders are sent and received. The market is then settled in our post-market processes. And we'll take a moment now to break this down a little further for you. This graph here represents 1 hour in the day-ahead market. Scheduling coordinators can submit different bid curves for each hour of the day. All of the economic bid and self-schedules, both supply and demand, are placed on a curve. After I go through the different market processes, I'll take a little detour and we'll talk about the different types of bids. So you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. On the left, we have the bid prices, and along the bottom of this graph here, we have the megawatts. This is a very simplified diagram here for you, but the green supply curve represents the supply bids lined up from the least expensive to the most expensive. The blue line has all of the demand bids, showing what demand is willing to pay. These are lined up from the most expensive to the least expensive. Where the 2 lines cross represents the amount of supply and demand megawatts that will clear in the day-ahead market. If a resource submits a successful bid and will therefore be contributing its generation to meet demand, it is said to clear the market. The cheapest resources tend to clear the market first, followed by the next cheapest option, and so forth until demand is met. When supply matches demand, the market is cleared, and the price of the last resource to offer in, plus other market operation charges, becomes the wholesale price of power for that particular hour. This is the first step in our plan for the following day, and we do this market clearing for each of the 24 hours of the following day. Energy is needed to meet the demand and keep the lights on, but we also need capacity available to back up the instantaneous energy need. Ancillary services support the reliable operation of the transmission system as it moves electricity from generating source to retail customers. These are the 4 ancillary service products that are procured in real time and in day ahead as well. Regulation corrects for short-term changes in electricity use that might affect the stability of the power system. These generators are under ISO control through the Automatic Generation Control, or AGC, and we have the ability to move these resources every 4 seconds. Operating reserves are capacity products designated to ensure reliability in the event of a grid disturbance. For example, a large generator that goes offline unexpectedly. Spinning reserves are synchronized to the grid and available to be dispatched as energy within a 10-minute period. Originally, this referred to increasing the torque applied to a turbine's rotor, but today it applies to other types of resources as well. For example, storage. Non-spinning reserves are not synchronized to the grid, but can synchronize and be available for dispatch within 10 minutes, such as a fast start generator. There are regulatory requirements on how much of each of these services that we need. We procure ancillary services in our BAA to meet certain reliability targets. There are regulating reserves that we have set based on procurement targets, and we meet these we set these in order to meet the WEC standards. We also have contingency reserves based on procurement targets set by WEC, and we have a residual unit commitment process to make sure that we are meeting the ISO system-wide and regional forecasts. For example, what happens if the amount of energy that clears the market is less than the ISO predicts it will need? Let's review residual unit commitments to understand how that process works. The market analyzes bids for residual unit commitments to cover a gap which occurs if the total cleared demand is less than the actual forecast of demand for that particular hour. In many cases, this need is fulfilled by supply that is already dedicated due to a resource adequacy program that is part of California's mandate, but other suppliers can also offer to provide this product, which is called residual unit commitment, or RUC. So we use RUC to bridge the gap between what clears based on the bid-in demand for each hour compared to the ISO forecast of actual demand for the coming day. Residual unit commitment ensures reliability by filling the gap between the physical supply that was committed and the ISO forecast of load. RUC is a capacity product that is procured in the day ahead in the event that we need the energy in real time. We procure these from bids provided by resource adequacy resources and other capacity bids as well. There may be a payment for the capacity in day ahead, and if we need the energy, there will be an additional payment for energy in real time at the real-time energy price. If a resource is awarded RUC for capacity, they will need to submit an energy bid in real time. I wanted to discuss market power mitigation a little bit more. When there are multiple resources available to serve load in an area, prices are competitive. But if there's only one resource available to serve the load, they have the ability to command the price, and this is known as market power. For every hour, the day-ahead market runs a test to see if any resource has the potential for market power. If the potential for market power is determined, the resource's bid will be mitigated to a more reasonable price if required. Resource bids that are mitigated are reduced to a cost-based bid. I also wanted to point out that while we do this hourly in the day-ahead market, when we're running the real-time market, we're also doing this every 15 minutes and every 5 minutes in each one of those consecutive runs. The ISO grid operators need a plan for operating the next day to ensure reliability. We use the day-ahead market to create this plan, and as a result, resources are committed to provide supply to meet the demand that cleared in the market, supply to meet the ISO demand forecast, and ancillary services to meet the reliability requirement, in other words, to make sure that we have enough additional capacity online in the event that it's needed in real time. I mentioned that we were going to take a little detour to talk more about bids, so we have a couple of slides here that will go into that. Energy bids provide an economic signal indicating a participant's willingness to supply or to purchase energy. All of the day-ahead bids and real-time bids are submitted by scheduling coordinators. When a scheduling coordinator submits a bid for a supply resource, they provide us with the quantity of megawatts they are willing to offer at various price points. As the price increases, the quantity offered increases also. I'll give you 10 megawatts if the price is $20, but I'll give you 50 megawatts if the price is $100. These prices are meant to reflect their cost of providing supply. When submitting bids, we have a bid cap of $1,000 and a bid floor of negative $150. So the bids submitted are going to fall in that range. The scheduling coordinator for demand also submits bids, letting the market know how much they are willing to pay to buy megawatts. The lower the price, the more they are willing to buy. We also have the ability to submit self-schedules, meaning price takers. These are offers to either supply or buy, no matter what the price. For example, a supplier could submit a self-schedule for 100 megawatts of energy. This tells the market that they are planning on generating 100 megawatts tomorrow, regardless of the price. Perhaps they have a contract with an LSP to provide those megawatts. On the flip side of the coin, a load-serving entity could submit a self-schedule for 100 megawatts of demand in the day-ahead market. This is a signal to the market that they will buy supply no matter what price the market clears at. They might do this to ensure that they secure supply to serve their demand in advance of the real-time market because they feel like the price may be higher in real time. Here we're looking at the same graph that we looked at earlier, but we're showing you where those self-schedules show up. The self-schedules show up at the beginning of the economic curves because they are indifferent to the prices, so they will clear the market. As I mentioned before, the place where the supply and demand curves cross indicates the amount of supply and demand that clear in the day-ahead market for that particular hour. In real time, any additional demand that shows up will be served by the real-time market at the real-time price. So if you look at the demand that is to the right side of the total cleared demand, these are quantities that will clear in real time. There's a little more to this story as well. What if we have a lot of resources that bid at the same price? How does the market decide what resources to commit? So here we have an example of 5 different resources that bid into the day-ahead market, and they're all bidding in at the same exact price. So what differentiates them? The bids that suppliers submit have more than just a bid price for their energy. They also supply additional information, such as the cost for starting up the unit and running at their minimum output. Even though all of these resources have a bid of $20, it may cost more to start up a gas-fired generator than a wind resource. So the market will award the wind resource in lieu of the gas-fired generator, given any transmission constraints or local reliability needs notwithstanding. Additionally, the market looks at whether it's cheaper to start up a resource or use one that's already running. Is it cheaper to keep a resource on at its minimum level or to start up a different one? So the market has an algorithm and formulas to figure out the best way, the most optimized way to make this happen. Speaking of an optimization, we also need other information, not just bids, in order to complete the plan for the day-ahead time frame, and we're going to take a moment to look at those. The network model is like a map of the transmission lines, the load, and the generation. Consider this to be a roadmap of the system. It provides the market with all of the options for flowing the supply to meet the demand. Transmission limits let the market know how many megawatts of supply can flow on each transmission line. We also need to know the attributes of all of the resources that are submitting economic bids in the market. We have a database with all of the participating resources that tells us information such as how long it takes a resource to start up, what its ramp rate is, how many times can we start it up per day, if we start it up, how long does it have to be on for before we can shut it down, how many times can it be started or shut down in a day, the maximum number of megawatts it can produce, the type of fuel it uses, and so forth. Many, many data inputs. This informs the market of how each resource can be used. Forecasts are used to predict the needs for the next day. These forecasts include demand forecasts as well as weather forecasts, providing insight into energy requirements and also the potential quantity of renewables that might be available. For example, if it's going to be a windy day, perhaps the wind turbines are going to be available. Transmission outages and resource outages will impact the amount of megawatts that can flow, and the market uses this information in determining which resources can be awarded. We've talked a lot about the day-ahead market and how that works, and now we're going to take a look at the real-time market. There are three main timelines in the real-time market. Bids from all market participants and base schedules from the energy imbalance market are submitted 75 minutes before each individual trade hour. These bids are used in the hourly processes for intertie transactions, the 15-minute market, and the real-time dispatch, which occurs every 5 minutes. The real-time market fine-tunes the flow of electricity to follow fluctuations in supply and demand. As we move into the real-time market at least 5 hours ahead, we're looking at our updated forecast and we begin committing resources as necessary. And by committing, I mean deciding to start them up. From this time, the day-ahead market schedules are posted up until 75 minutes before the trade hour. Bids can be submitted for the real-time market. The hour-ahead scheduling process is a process for scheduling energy and ancillary services based on the bids submitted by imports. Internal resources will receive advisory schedules for the next hour, and imports or exports will receive financially binding commitments during this hourly process time frame. In our real-time unit commitment process, the ISO makes final decisions on resource commitments to adjust the day-ahead schedule. Energy is paid at the day-ahead or the real-time prices based on when the resource receives its market award. Inputs into the real-time market include the day-ahead results, information from our databases, real-time system information, real-time bids, additional outage information, and transmission line information. And the market results generate real-time dispatches for energy and ancillary services, instructions to start up or shut down a resource, and then dispatch instructions that go out every 5 minutes. In the 5-minute time frame, we also have 5-minute prices that are set as the energy is dispatched. Now, I've thrown a lot at you about who we are, what we do, and how the markets work. Before we talk about reliability, I think this would be a good time for a question break. So, Grace, if you would, let me know if we have anybody in the question queue. And maybe Grace here, if you could give some instructions for the listeners on how they can add themselves into the queue.
To ask a question, press #2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name and question.
While we're waiting for callers to line up, I see a note in the chat that asks to repeat the bid floor, so I'll do that now. The bid floor is negative $150, and again, the bid cap was $1,000.
We have no phone questions yet. As a reminder, you can press #2 to ask a question, or you may also submit it via the chat by selecting all panelists from the message box and hit enter to send. We do have one question. From the CASO Learning Center, there is a slide that details the DAM timeline TD8 to trade date. I had a specific question regarding TD2, which is the ISO trial run. Where does the ISO post the results? In addition, how does an SC confirm that they have signed the NDA?
Okay. Let me see if I can research that, and we'll include that in the notes that we send out with the email along with the survey. My understanding, I believe, that there are results that are published in one of our private tools for the scheduling coordinators. I believe it's in CMRI, Customer Market Results Interface, where you see those trial run results, and in order to view them, you do have to sign the non-disclosure agreement. I am unfamiliar with the process for signing that, so I'll see if I can get you more information and include that in the email. I know there's a specific process that's required to go through. So I'll make a note of that, and we'll follow up later.
As a reminder.
Sorry, Grace. There was also a note that asks where we can see a map of the network model. That's on the ISO website. You can look for the full network model there, and off the top of my head, I can't remember which menu it's off of, perhaps operations, planning, or something like that. I'll see if we can find it. I've got somebody else in the room with me who might be able to look around the website real fast and tell me. So we'll get back with you in a few minutes on where you can find a map of the network model. And we're going to go ahead and, Grace, if there are no further questions, can you just let me know real fast if there were any, is there anybody else on the line?
We have no questions on the line.
Okay. We'll move forward and talk about reliability, and I'll loop back when I have answers to some of those questions that were posed in the chat. From a reliability perspective, the ISO is responsible for the constant and reliable flow of electricity for the health, safety, and welfare of our consumers. Maintaining reliability is a balancing act that requires a lot of expertise and controlling many moving parts. So what is reliability? In short, it is all about keeping the lights on and the energy flowing, and our system operations is at the forefront of this task. Our operators are responsible for maintaining the reliability of the grid by balancing supply and demand using various resource types. Operators are located in 2 control centers, which are continuously connected in real time through instant video conferencing capability. Both control rooms are operated 24/7, and though Folsom is the primary control room, Lincoln is sharing duties, so the entire operation of the grid can be transferred between control rooms at any time. There are multiple redundancies on all systems, providing one of the highest levels of dependability in computer system operations. As I mentioned, reliability of the electric grid is a primary focus. Electricity is a unique commodity in that it is produced, delivered, and consumed at nearly the speed of light. And throughout the process, the goal is to maintain grid frequency at 60 Hertz in order to keep the system safe and keep the lights on. Electricity is produced by the supply, which consists of generation and imports. Electricity is delivered via transmission and distribution lines and then consumed by the demand, which are the load and exports. Maintaining this balance between these two is similar to driving on a highway and trying to keep your car consistently at 60 miles an hour. Like the gas pedal on a car, in order to maintain 60 hertz, you either increase or decrease generation to meet changes in demand. Because of its instantaneous nature, the ISO uses technology that takes a pulse of the system every few seconds, and our highly skilled and trained system operators constantly monitor multiple bits of data to be able to instantly react to fluctuating conditions such as weather changes and sudden supply shortfalls or surpluses. In addition to maintaining this balance of supply and demand, we also maintain those reserves, that capacity that's available to be tapped into should we enter into a contingency event or grid emergency. There are a number of ways that folks are able to participate in the ISO market, and any interactions where the ISO will provide services require entities to go through processes that consist of signing contracts and non-disclosure agreements, passing tests, and gaining access to applications as necessary. Depending on the resource capabilities, market participants can elect to bid into the energy and ancillary services market or sell other electricity products. Physical supply and demand are bids for those resources that have the ability to provide or consume the energy needed on the bulk electric system. Convergence bids, or bids for virtual supply or virtual demand, are financial positions taken in the day-ahead market and liquidated in the real-time market. Convergence bidding is designed to reduce the average price differences between day-ahead and real-time, as well as the volatility of the difference between day-ahead and real-time prices. Ancillary services are considered capacity products and help maintain the reliability of the grid by ensuring that we have additional resources held back in reserves so that we have the ability to handle different types of contingency events, whether short-term regulation or operational needs that must be covered within a 10-minute window. Residual unit commitment, which we talked about, is a way to ensure that the ISO procures enough capacity to meet the day-ahead forecast by bridging the gap between the physical resources that clear the day-ahead market compared to the forecasted demand for that day. We also have something called the flexible ramping product in real time, which provides additional upward and downward flexible ramping capabilities to account for uncertainty due to demand and renewable forecasting errors in the real-time market. This product ensures that some unloaded or unused capacity is reserved to be dispatched as energy if needed. As I mentioned earlier, the ISO is now providing reliability coordination services to a majority of the Western Interconnection. On the financial side, congestion revenue rights are financial instruments which are made available through allocation and auction processes that enable rights holders to manage congestion cost variability based on locational marginal pricing. These rights are acquired primarily for offsetting congestion costs that occur in the day-ahead market. Inter-SC trades are an optional accounting service that we offer to help facilitate financial transactions between entities. Speaking of these entities, there are many ways to interact with the ISO, but only a scheduling coordinator is authorized to transact business directly with the ISO. A scheduling coordinator is an entity authorized by the ISO to buy and sell power in the ISO market. Scheduling coordinators bid and schedule their supply into the market or submit demand bids, and then based on the awards, energy flows across the transmission system and is distributed to the customer by local utilities. If an entity chooses not to become a scheduling coordinator, it would need to contract the services of a certified scheduling coordinator to participate on their behalf. Scheduling coordinators may include convergence bidders, demand response providers, utility-owned generation, independent generators, energy imbalance market participants, community choice aggregators, and power marketers. There is a process that entities must complete in order to be qualified as a scheduling coordinator, which includes mandatory training, financial and testing requirements, as well as ongoing adherence to policies. We have more information on how to become a scheduling coordinator on our website, and we also have a business practice manual specifically for that purpose, which is called the Scheduling Coordinator Certification and Termination Business Practice Manual. There are business practice manuals at the ISO for all different lines of business based on the areas that you are focusing on or participating in. I wanted to take a moment here to talk about the energy imbalance market, which is something that currently is only a real-time market. The energy imbalance market, or EIM, is an extension of the ISO's real-time market, which is offered to any balancing authority in the western area of North America. It provides a low-cost, low-risk option that balances load and resources automatically and economically. Full market members seamlessly participate in both the day-ahead and the real-time market, as indicated by the folks on the left in the ISO footprint, while the energy imbalance market, or EIM entities, only participate in the real-time market. Participants are able to submit bids which will be utilized by the ISO to optimize energy transfer and generation output between all participants in both 15-minute and 5-minute increments. The ISO operates the only energy imbalance market in the West and uses advanced ISO market systems which automatically choose low-cost resources to reliably meet customer demand. We have several participants in the energy imbalance market with more planned to join in the coming years. I wanted to go over a couple of points with regards to the energy imbalance market. On the left-hand side, in a non-EIM world, each BA, or balancing authority area, balances load and resources within their own borders. And on the right side, in an energy imbalance market, you see that the market dispatches resources across BAs to balance energy. EIM entities see benefits from better, more cost-effective dispatch of their internal resources to each EIM area. You'll also see economic transfers that happen between areas. The area sending power sells supply in excess, and the area that receives the power does not have to dispatch their internal expensive resources. Every time we add an EIM entity, the benefits are realized for that entity, but there are also compounded effects to the other EIM entities. If you take a look at the benefit reports that are located on westerneim.com, you'll see that from the trends that the benefits grow in a nonlinear fashion. Another point of interest with regard to EIM is that the energy imbalance market is a portion of the responsibilities that a BA is charged with, which means that these entities are still responsible for running their own BAAs and have their own responsibilities that are maintained. There's a note in the chat that asks if there are market power monitoring mechanisms for EIM. The answer is yes, and my understanding is they're also being evaluated currently for how those may change in the future, which is a good segue to say that this presentation that we're sitting in right now talks about how things work today, but we are continuously changing and modifying how the markets work. So I would advise those folks that are interested in not only how things work today, but how things will be working in the future, to take a look at the variety of stakeholder initiatives that we have on our website and focus in on the ones that are important or relevant to you, and you can learn how we are planning to make changes in the future, and also it's an opportunity for you to have your own voice heard and to add your comments and opinions into the discussion as these policies are being shaped. So that's a plug for going out to the website and looking at what current initiatives we have now, and to take a look at what we have planned for the coming years, and to join in and participate in the discussion. We've talked about day-ahead and real-time processes. Now we're going to take a moment to talk about post-market processes. Each market transaction is distinct and will be accounted for separately in a stack of coded transactions and associated prices based on market activity and data that is pulled from meters. Here in this example, this is a high-level depiction of the activity that occurs in the day-ahead and real-time markets. It begins with market participants taking various positions by submitting bids and schedules. The market processes run and provide an optimized solution that is least cost while meeting local reliability needs. These transactions are then tallied on settlement statements by trade date and finally compiled and sent out via invoice or payment advice on a weekly schedule. Our day-ahead and real-time markets are settled out financially in our post-market processes. And one principle to keep in mind is that the ISO market results are stacked kind of like pancakes. What happens in the day-ahead market stays in the day-ahead. Real-time changes to schedules and their associated prices will be stacked separately for accounting purposes for both the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. Entities can review all of these market transactions on their individual settlement statements, which we will talk about next. This diagram that we're looking at here is a simplified example of one particular hour and how it is viewed and the activity that has occurred from day ahead into real time. So in this particular example, this resource was awarded 120 megawatts in the day ahead for that particular hour. You see the megawatts going along the left-hand side, and you see across the bottom, that's the settlement interval of 1 hour. In the 15-minute market, they received an incremental award, and so they're going to be providing an additional 24 megawatts. Those will be paid at the 15-minute market price. The first 120 will be paid at the day-ahead price. And then, additionally, in the 5-minute intervals, they received an award for 12 more megawatts, and those megawatts will be paid for at the 5-minute price. So, as I mentioned previously in the presentation, depending on where you are awarded, that will determine the market price that is used for those megawatt quantities. Of course, there's a lot more to settlements, and each type of transaction is accounted for separately. We use meter data for billable quantities to represent the energy generated or consumed during a settlement interval. Late meter data impacts settlement statements for the entire market. Therefore, we have specific rules of conduct in place to outline the specific requirements and expectations of the market participants. The goal here is to take the revenue quality meter data and turn that into settlement quality meter data, which can be submitted to the ISO for settlement processing. Meter data is collected in one of two ways. The meter can either be directly polled by the ISO, or the meter data can be sent in by the scheduling coordinator for the purpose of reporting the actual performance of that resource. Revenue quality meter data is required by the ISO for entities internal to the BA. A meter installation and certification process by ISO authorized meter inspectors takes place to ensure that meters are up to standard. Raw meter data is acquired directly by the ISO, and the goal is to turn that raw or revenue quality meter data into the settlement quality meter data by putting it through our validation, estimating, and editing process. Settlement quality meter data is acceptable for entities external to the ISO BA. And then we're going to go through some metering timelines in the coming slides. We also have, I wanted to note, an annual self-certification process in place to ensure that metering is accurate. Settlements are the calculation, billing, and invoicing of charges and payments for market and transmission-related activities between market participants and the ISO. The settlement cycle follows a specific timeline and processes for publication of statements, invoices, and payment advices. We have day-ahead results and real-time results along with the meter data flow through the settlements process, and this is output on a settlement statement for each individual trade date. There are formulas associated with each charge code to determine how transactions will be settled, and these calculations are broken down on the daily settlement statement and then collated into weekly invoices, which identify charges to be remitted and payment advices that show what will be paid out. Here are the timelines that I said I would talk about. So each entity receives a series of settlement statements by trade date. Initial settlement statements are only an estimate of the final result, and marginal adjustments may be needed to be made several months after the trade date. If we look at the legend here, we've got a diagram, and the T stands for trade date, B is for business days, and M is months. Invoices or payment advices for market transaction are published weekly on Wednesdays and include market transactions from trading days Monday through Sunday of the previous week. Invoices are due for payment by 10 a.m. on the following Tuesday. Payment advices are then dispersed as applicable at 2 p.m. that same Tuesday afternoon. As the ISO is a not-for-profit organization, all the money that comes into the market gets dispersed back out into the market with the exception of our grid management charges, or GMC, that covers specified operating costs. This diagram here depicts the daily settlement timelines, which show how many times one trade date will be processed for adjustment and accurate calculation. The letter T, or trade date, plus 3 business days is the first estimated statement that is produced by the reporting system. The next time this data will be processed for updates or changes will be at the T plus 12, B, or 12 business days after that trade date, that milestone, which includes any meter data submitted by T plus 8B. There are also subsequent statements that are published periodically thereafter. There may or may not be future adjustments in further settlement statements, but entities will only be responsible for the amount that changes from the previous settlement statement. Key point here is, speaking of initiatives or things that are changing, this timeline that we're looking at here is how it works right now. We also have a settlement timeline initiative that will be changing and adjusting these dates. That process is occurring now, so I would suggest that you check in with that process and follow up and find out what the new plan is going to be, as that is something that, if you are participating in the ISO market, will be affecting you in the future. The ISO has a payment calendar which keeps track of each calendar day and the settlement activity that occurs on those dates. I have a bunch of links at the bottom of this presentation, and I will share a link to that payment calendar with you at the end of these slides as well. Let us take a question break here. Grace, if you will give the instructions and let callers know how they can put themselves in the queue, we'll go ahead and pause for questions here.
Once again, to ask a question, press #2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name and question. Alternatively, you may submit your question in the message box provided.
I do have a follow-up for the person who asked about where the full network model is. If you go to the ISO website under the Market and Operations tab, there is a network modeling, I forgot to say that again to me. Oh, sorry.
Market and Operations drop-down menu, Network and Resource Modeling.
Okay, thanks. So that's where that is located.
We have no questions over the phone or chat, but as a reminder, you can press #2 to enter the question queue.
I see a question in the chat that asks about a complete transmission map of CAISO, and so We actually don't provide transmission maps, but you can receive transmission maps. You can contact WEC to get transmission maps of the Western Interconnection, or if you happen to be an RC customer of the ISO, then you do have additional information on the private RC portal that you have access to if you're an RC customer. So you can get maps from WEC, or if you use the ISO to provide you with RC services, then you can find more information on the RC portal. Okay, it sounds like no more phone questions, so we're going to go ahead and continue. We have given you a lot of information, and now we're going to talk about how you can monitor and participate in the ISO. This is a screenshot of our website. There are a variety of tabs across the top, and depending on what you're interested in, you can hone in on various sections. There is kind of where that light bulb is in the middle of the screenshot is something called Today's Outlook, which provides real-time information. We publish the current system demand as well as today's forecasted peak, and if you click on that section, it will take you to a page with graphs of the current day's load and available resources. If you're interested in renewables, you can access the monthly renewables performance report off of the Market and Operations tab. There's a subsection for reports and bulletins. This gives you a broad menu of metrics related to renewable energy, net demand, oversupply, curtailment, reliability, and negative pricing. If you are interested in the energy imbalance market, for more information on the current state of the EIM and how it will continue to evolve, we have a Western EIM website. This provides you a great deal of resource material, including computer-based training modules that you can view, and you'll also find, if you're interested, the list of active and pending EIM participants. With regard to reliability, reliability is an essential element of operating the electric grid, and as I mentioned earlier, the ISO is now a reliability coordinator and is operating these services to other balancing authorities in the Western United States. You can visit the RC West page on our website for more information about the services provided by RC West. When I post this presentation to the website, you will have clickable links on this page, and these are short videos that you can hear from an operator and a market operator about a day in the life in our control room. Interesting subject matter, so you can click on and check out a couple of those interviews that we have posted on YouTube, and you'll see the link there. For those of you that are interested in additional information about the ISO, we have something called the Open Access Same Time Information System, or OASIS. Here you will find real-time data related to the ISO transmission system and its market. For example, you can find information such as system demand forecasts, transmission outage and capacity status, market prices, and market result data. While some information about resources is proprietary and only available to customers directly, there is a great deal of information available to the public, and this website here, this application, the OASIS application, allows for that data to be pulled and used by anyone or any interested entity who wants to know more details. This screenshot here shows you more of what you can see on today's Outlook, which I had mentioned earlier. It's our most visited public web page with over 200,000 visitors a year. Folks are interested in viewing changing patterns of supply and demand, what the forecasted and actual peak are, and energy supplies by resource and resource type, along with real-time energy prices. You can also find this up-to-date information about what is happening on the grid and at the ISO on our ISO Today phone app, which is available through Google Play or Apple Store, depending on your phone type. I mentioned business practice manuals earlier. We have business practice manuals available on the BPM page. These business practice manuals provide detailed rules, procedures, and examples for how we administer, operate, and plan, how we account for different requirements of the ISO and the markets, and these are all consistent with the ISO tariff. It is important for our customers to be aware of these processes and to strictly adhere to them. I mentioned we have a change management process, so if you as a stakeholder have suggestions or would like further clarification on elements in our BPMs, you have the ability to submit a proposed revision request asking for more clarity in specific sections of the BPMs, and that will fall into this business practice manual update process, and you can see the diagram of how that works on this page here. We have something called the daily briefing, which is a once-a-day email that summarizes everything that's happening at the ISO. In order to stay up to date with what's happening at the ISO or in the industry in general, we suggest that you sign up for the daily briefing, which also provides a comprehensive summary of ISO news and activities, including announcements of upcoming calendar events, regulatory filings, any new or enhanced features, things that we've added to the website, and this is where you're going to get a lot of the information on those ongoing stakeholder initiatives. If we're designing something new, we'll tell you about it. We'll tell you where you can go to view the posted paper that it describes how it works, and then how you can insert yourself into the conversation to make sure that your voice is heard as we are discussing and planning and figuring out the best way to implement and how to accommodate everyone who's participating in the market. Our web page has a lot of information on it, and we're continuously changing that information and providing you with new details. California is at the vanguard of the transition to renewable energy, and so all of the world's eyes are on the ISO's innovation, technology, and strategies for greening the grid. Public affairs and media relations are at the heart of the ISO's mission to inform, educate, and promote the clean, reliable electric system and efficient markets of the future. Here you'll see the media hotline number and email addresses to reach out to our media relations team if you have the desire to do so. We also have a dedicated developer site that we created to enhance customer service and simplify doing business with the ISO. This is a comprehensive website for IT developers that consolidates the technical documentation developers need for the ISO's application programming interfaces, or APIs, which allows developers to find connectivity instructions, interface definition files, sample code, URLs, frequently asked questions, and getting started guides, along with a glossary of acronyms and technical terminology common in specification documents. The ISO is committed to providing our customers with a broad menu of high-quality training courses on the ISO market functionality, as well as individual market applications. These courses are organized into areas of focus, or tracks, that are designed to be an industry resource for market participants and the general public to learn about electric grids and markets and the ISO's role in the electricity system. We are continuing to evolve our training programs and enhance our training materials to better meet the various levels of experience, technical levels, and needs of our customers, and to make it a more user-friendly experience. We are creating more computer-based trainings and learning bursts to break down some of these complicated subjects into bite-sized, manageable pieces, so please keep an eye on this page to find updated content and learning opportunities. These next two slides will show you the various links that you will be able to access. These cover all types of information that we referenced through the presentation, so links to the website for various regulatory agencies, operating procedures, business practice manuals specific to market operations or the energy imbalance market page, a variety of things, also the payment calendar that I had mentioned earlier. In addition, there are links to the materials presented at our Resource Interconnection Fair, which is an educational forum intended to help participants understand the process involved in connecting resources to the ISO grid. The format provides an opportunity to learn about the various aspects of resource interconnection from initiating a new interconnection request through commercial operations. I have a closing slide here, but before I give you the closing remarks, Grace, if you would, give one last opportunity to ask questions from our participants. Grace, could we do another question break here?
Once again, to ask a question, press #2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your question. Alternatively, you may submit your question in the message box provided.
While we're waiting for callers to line up in queue, we do have an answer on the NDA, so Gina, if you wouldn't mind answering that question.
Yes, so there was a question on how to sign an NDA, or maybe how to find out if you aren't sure if you have an NDA that's already signed. So to find the section on NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, you go to ISO.com, use the rules drop-down, and navigate to contracts and agreements. Once clicking on the contracts and agreements link, then on that page there will be a section on NDAs. There's a couple of different types of NDAs, so you would pick which one, and there's instructions associated with each NDA form. And if you're not sure, if you already have one of those NDAs signed, you can reach out to KISO@KISO.com.
Thank you, Gina.
We received a question in the queue. You mentioned that there will be new trades dates in the near future. When are those expected to go into effect?
Oh, let me provide clarity on that. So there is going to be a new settlement timeline. So we're not changing any of our trade dates, but on the settlement slide where we talked about the first statement comes out 3 business days after, then meter data is due 8 days after that, and then there's another statement at 12 business days. Those dates are going to be changing as part of the settlement timeline initiative. So I believe that is expected to go into effect, I think, towards the end of this year, but I'm not 100% sure, and it also is dependent on the readiness of our customers for that change. So I would hook yourself and link yourself up to the settlements timeline initiative, where you'll be able to follow up on that and get more information. So trade dates are not changing, but the settlements timeline is going to be changing in the future to provide more efficiency to that process.
And as a reminder, you may press #2 to enter the question queue or send it via chat.
I see a note in the chat asking about the NDA. We're going to go ahead and include instructions about the NDA in the follow-up email that we send after this call. So yes, we'll go ahead and include those on the email. I understand you might not have been able to jot down each piece. So yep, we'll include that in our email. It looks like we don't have any additional phone questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out here. In a couple of days, we'll post this presentation to our Learning Center under the Markets and Operations Path link. The presentation and the embedded links will act as your toolkit to help you find more information on each topic. The reason I say in a couple of days is we have to wait to get the recording of this webinar. So we get this recording in a couple of days and we post all of it together. We'll post the recording on the webinar, recording of the webinar on the Learning Center along with today's slides, so that if you're interested in listening to any part again, or if you would like to bring it to the attention of others in your organization, you'll be able to do so. If you have questions on anything that we've presented here today, or you want to find more information, email us at customertraining@CAISO.com. For those of you who signed in to today's webinar, you'll be receiving an email from customertraining@CAISO.com that will include a link to a survey. We highly encourage you to take a few minutes to complete the survey to let us know how we can better serve your training needs. I do want to mention to you that we have a variety of folks dialing into this call from a wide range of experience, and we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of everyone who dials into the call. So take a few minutes to answer questions on the survey and let us know what you thought about today's webinar. If there are things you would like us to discuss in the future, things you wish we would expand upon more in this type of setting, please provide that feedback. It is much appreciated, and we always use that along the lines of continuous improvement, or with a feeling of continuous improvement. We always want to hear that type of feedback. We want to be able to serve your training needs and make sure we're meeting those for you. This concludes our webinar session today. Thank you for your participation. We hope that you found it useful and informative, and we hope that you have a great day.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.